At about 5:45 on the evening of September 30th, 1955, a silver Porsche and a black Ford met at a junction in the middle of California farm country. The Porsche was traveling west on U.S. Route 466. The Ford was turning left onto State Route 41. One of the two drivers was 24 years old, had made 3 films, and had been a movie star for roughly 18 months. He was dead within minutes. The other was 23, a student driving home for the weekend, and he walked away with a cut on his nose. He would spend the next 40 years refusing to talk about it. That junction is now one of the most photographed pieces of road in America. People still drive out there to stand in it. But the road they're standing on doesn't exist. Not the number, not the alignment, not the intersection as it was that evening. Because in the 70 years since, almost everything physically connected to that afternoon has been removed. Because before it was a shrine, US 466 was just the 4th branch of Route 66. US 466 was created in the 1930s, and its number tells you exactly what it was. In the American highway system, a 3-digit route number identifies a branch. The last 2 digits name the parent road. The first digit is just a counter: first branch, second, third, and so on. 466 was the 4th branch of US Route 66, which means the road James Dean died on and the road Americans spent 70 years calling the Devil's Highway were siblings. US 666 was the 6th branch. Same parent, same convention. Generated by the same system in the same decade. Neither number was chosen. Both were counted out. US 466 ran west to east across the bottom third of California and out into the desert. It began near Morro Bay on the Pacific, climbed inland through Paso Robles, crossed the southern San Joaquin Valley at Bakersfield, then ran east through the Mojave, Barstow, Baker, into Nevada past Las Vegas, and finally to Kingman, Arizona, where it ended at its parent. Vera endpoints, they shifted over the route's life. It was, in other words, a connector, a road whose entire purpose was to link the Pacific coast to the mother road. Nobody wrote songs about it. There was no television series. It appears in no novels. For its entire working life, US 466 was a number people used to get somewhere else, which is what makes the rest of this strange. An anonymous connector road became, for one afternoon, the most famous stretch of pavement in the world. At a junction most drivers passed without slowing down. To understand what happened at that junction, you have to follow the day that led to it, and it starts with a speeding ticket. James Dean had finished shooting Giant 8 days earlier. He was 24. East of Eden had been released in March. Rebel Without a Cause was complete and would open in October, 27 days after he died. Giant would follow the year after. He had made 3 films. 2 of them had not yet come out. He was also a racer. Not a celebrity who collected fast cars, an actual amateur competitor who had run at Palm Springs, Bakersfield, and Santa Barbara that year and finished respectably. On September 21st, he took delivery of a new Porsche 550 Spyder, and it's worth understanding what that car actually was, because almost every telling of this story gets the weight of it wrong. The 550 was not a fast road car. It was a racing car sold to the public, an aluminum body over a tubular frame, a 4-cylinder engine mounted behind the driver, and a curb weight somewhere around 1,200 pounds. Roughly 90 of them were built. The bodywork was thin enough that pressing on it left a mark. There were no seatbelt requirements, no crumple structure, no roll bar. Dean had the number 130 painted on it, and a name lettered across the tail, Little Bastard. The plan that weekend was a race at Salinas, about 300 miles north. The original intention was to tow the Porsche behind a station wagon. Dean changed his mind. He wanted seat time in the new car before the event, so the Porsche was driven. Dean at the wheel, Rolf Wütherich beside him, a German mechanic sent by the Porsche factory specifically to prepare the car, Behind them, in the wagon and trailer, were Bill Hickman, a friend and stunt driver, and Sanford Roth, a photographer on assignment. They left Los Angeles around midday. At approximately 3:30 that afternoon, near Bakersfield, a California Highway Patrol officer stopped the Porsche and wrote James Dean a ticket for speeding. Hickman, following in the wagon, was cited as well. They carried on north. Roughly 2 hours later, they reached the junction. What happened in the next 4 seconds has been described 1,000 times. Most of those descriptions are wrong. Here's the geometry, because it decides everything. US 466 ran roughly east-west. State Route 41 branched off it, heading northeast toward Fresno. The two met in a Y, not a square crossroads, but a shallow angled fork in flat, open country with very long sight lines in both directions. Dean was heading west on 466 into a low evening sun. Donald Turnipseed was heading east on 466 in a 1950 Ford Tudor, driving home to Tulare from Cal Poly. He needed to turn left, across Dean's lane, onto Route 41. He made the turn. The Porsche struck the Ford almost head-on, slightly offset. The Ford spun and came to rest facing back the way it had come. The Porsche was thrown clear of the junction and came to rest crumpled. Rolf Vutherish was thrown from the car. He survived with serious injuries. Donald Turnipseed climbed out of the Ford with a cut nose and bruising. James Dean was still in the driver's seat. He was taken by ambulance toward Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. Now the part that's usually wrong. The story that has followed this crash for 70 years is that Dean was traveling at enormous speed. Figures upward of 100 miles an hour get quoted routinely, and they're presented as established fact. The investigation did not support that. And here's why the distinction matters less than people assume. In a 1,200-pound car with an aluminum skin and no structure around the occupant, a head-on collision at ordinary highway speed is already at the edge of survivability. The energy involved in two vehicles closing on each other doesn't need to be extraordinary, it just needs to be enough. The 550 offered essentially no protection. That was not a design flaw, it was a racing car, and racing cars in 1955 were built to be light, not to be survived. The coroner's inquest found no criminal fault. Turnipseed was not charged. And that verdict is where the second story begins, the one almost nobody tells. Donald Turnipseed was 23 years old. He was a Navy veteran. He was studying electrical engineering. He was driving home on a road he had driven many times. He made a left turn, and a car he did not see arrived. The inquest cleared him. No charges were filed. Every official finding treated it as an accident, and by any reasonable reading of the evidence, it was. None of that mattered, because the man in the other car was James Dean, and James Dean was about to become something nobody at that junction could have anticipated. Rebel Without a Cause opened 4 weeks later. Giant followed the next year. Dean was nominated for an Academy Award posthumously, twice in consecutive years, which had never happened before and has rarely happened since. He became far more famous dead than he had been alive, and Donald Turnipseed became permanently the man who killed James Dean. He never gave an interview, not once in 40 years. He was approached constantly. Journalists, biographers, documentary crews, fans who tracked down his address. He refused all of it. He went home to Tulare, built an electrical contracting business, raised a family, and by every account of people who knew him, simply did not discuss that evening with anyone. He died in 1995, aged 63. There's a version of this story where he's a footnote, the other driver, named once in the second paragraph. But look at what actually happened to him. A 23-year-old made an ordinary mistake on an ordinary road, was found blameless by every authority that examined it, and then spent 4 decades declining to hand over the worst 4 seconds of his life to strangers who felt entitled to them. Rolf Vutherish, the mechanic in the passenger seat, had it worse in a different way. He recovered physically. He struggled badly afterwards for years. He was killed in a car crash in Germany in 1981. 2 people walked away from that junction. The car did not. And what happened to it next is where this story stops being tragic and starts being strange. The wreck of the Porsche was bought by a customizer named George Barris. Barris was one of the best-known car builders in Los Angeles. He would later build the 1966 Batmobile. He was also, and this matters, exceptionally good at publicity. What happened next depends entirely on who you believe. According to the accounts that circulated afterwards, the car began hurting people. It slipped while being unloaded and broke a mechanic's legs. Its engine was sold to a doctor who was killed in a race. Its drivetrain went to another driver seriously injured in the same event. 2 tires, sold intact, blew out simultaneously. A garage storing it burned down. It fell from a display stand and injured a teenager. A truck carrying it crashed. And then, in 1960, while being transported back from a highway safety exhibit in Florida, it disappeared. The transport arrived. The car was not inside. It has never been recovered. There is a standing reward that has gone unclaimed for decades. Now, the honest part. Almost every element of that list traces back to George Barris, who owned the car, exhibited it commercially, and had a direct financial interest in it being interesting. Several incidents have never been independently documented. Some of the people named in them are difficult to verify at all. That doesn't make the disappearance untrue. The car genuinely vanished, and that part is documented. But the curse, as a curse, was assembled by a man selling tickets to see it. There is one story that predates all of it, though, and it's the one that's hardest to dismiss because the person telling it had nothing to gain. Alec Guinness wrote in his own memoir that he met Dean outside a restaurant in Los Angeles about a week before the crash. Dean showed him the new Porsche. Guinness said he had a sudden and unwelcome feeling about it and told Dean that if he got into that car, he would be found dead in it within a week. Guinness wrote that he immediately apologized for saying something so strange. Dean died 7 days later. The car vanished in 1960. 4 years later, so did the road. California had a numbering problem. By the early 1960s, the state was running 2 overlapping systems: federal U.S. route numbers on the signs and its own legislative route numbers in the statute books, and they did not match. A single stretch of pavement could carry one number in the field and a completely different one in law. In 1964, California fixed it in a single move: the Great Renumbering. The state rewrote its entire highway numbering system in 1 year, aligning signs with legislation and eliminating a large number of U.S. route designations inside California as a consequence. US 466 was one of them. The road didn't close, nothing was demolished. The pavement stayed exactly where it was, carrying exactly the same traffic. What changed was the number on the shield. The western section, including the stretch through Cholame, including the junction, became State Route 46. The section from Bakersfield east became State Route 58. Further out in the desert, the interstates absorbed the rest. Outside California, the remaining segments were removed over the following years. And that was the end of US 466. 9 years after the most famous crash in American automotive history, the road it happened on stopped existing as a designation. There was no announcement. It was a line item in an administrative reorganization processed alongside dozens of others. Which means that today, when people say James Dean died on Highway 41, or on Route 46, or at the 46/41 junction, they are all describing the right place with the wrong name. He died on US 466, and US 466 has been gone for over 60 years. But the road had one more chapter left, and it involved a great many more deaths than one. The intersection was realigned. The original Y junction, the shallow fork where Turnipseed had to cross an oncoming lane to reach Route 41, was reconfigured as part of the safety work. The geometry that produced the crash is no longer there. You cannot stand in the intersection where James Dean died because that intersection was engineered out of existence. What is there is a memorial, and its origin is genuinely unexpected. In 1977, 22 years after the crash, a Japanese businessman named Seita Onishi paid for a monument to be built at Cholame, near the Jack Ranch Cafe, a short distance from the site. Stainless steel and concrete wrapped around a tree of heaven. Onishi had never met James Dean. He was a fan, in Japan, of an actor who died before most of his films were released. He commissioned and funded the memorial himself and specified materials chosen for permanence. It is now one of the most visited roadside memorials in the United States. There's a guest book, People Leave Things, and it stands beside a state highway near a junction that has been rebuilt, commemorating a man who died in a car that vanished, on a road whose number was deleted 9 years later. That's the thing that stays with you. Everything physically connected to that afternoon has been removed. The Porsche disappeared in 1960 and has never been found. The road number was deleted in 1964. The intersection was realigned out of existence. Rolf Wutterich was killed in a car crash in Germany. Donald Turnipseed died in 1995 without ever having publicly said a word about it. What's left is a stainless steel sculpture paid for by a man on the other side of the world and a stretch of ordinary California asphalt that people still pull over to photograph. James Dean was famous for 18 months while he was alive. He has been famous for 70 years since. US 466 carried traffic across the bottom of California for 30 years. It moved produce and freight and people. It connected the Pacific coast to Route 66. None of that is why anyone knows it existed. It's remembered for one evening at one junction involving one 24-year-old in a car built for a racetrack. And it isn't even called that anymore.